welcome to you all for this third part of a talk here about medical, shamanic perspectives, spiritual perspectives on all the things that we are working on as human beings. So I want to thank Ron and Tony here for the invitation, and also Eric, our sound computer wizard here. They have been struggling really hard to make all this work. So let's see if this keeps up. The detail is always with technology. This is a kind of interesting situation. Hope it keeps up. Hope you can all hear us well. And I want to make sure and just use a few points, talking points as these things are called nowadays, to see if we can get into a sharing and discussion together at some point. So let me start with kind of a provocative thesis here. My dad used to say, if you want to know about the weather, just look out the window. And meaning to say, don't watch TV, don't read the newspaper. And so I want to kind of reframe this and say, yeah, we can read the newspaper, we can watch TV for the news and everything, but I don't think we all need that. The news is in our guts, okay? So the news is in our guts in a literal sense, which we'll get to in a medically, and the news is in our guts metaphorically, in the sense of our intuition, our gut feeling. So this talk is about medical and shamanic perspectives as regards the epidemic of depression, anxiety, addiction, and meaninglessness. So let's just draw a parallel here between, to start off with, between our physical body and planet Earth. So there's this round ball floating through space. Let's look at this thing from the outside right now. It's a creation. There's rivers, which are like the arteries and the veins. There's an atmosphere, which is the air, the lung. There's forests that take care of this atmosphere. There's beings that feel drawn to each other, that want to share with each other. There is all kinds of food. There is mountains, there's valleys, there's oceans, there's water, air. All of this is in a very particular balance. All these elements, all these, the system that the Earth, this planet is made of. So if we want to look at this as an ecological being, we could say, okay, this being has a way of sometimes getting sick, but then also healing itself. We know water can clean itself. We know air that takes up a lot of smoke can clean itself, and so forth. And then these beings are put on this planet. At some point in evolution, they come. And they work pretty much the same way. Human bodies, bodies of animals, bodies of plants. There's all manner of circulation of juices, saps, blood, life force. All of this is working together. Now, what happened to this that beings get into a depressed state, into something that could be called anxiety in a clinical sense, or even meaninglessness, that they lose their zest for life, which, from all we know, is probably only humans, much as we can tell. Why does this happen? So one thing that happened is that about 200 years ago, we started making use of nature in a global way, exploiting it and influencing the immune system of nature by way of poisoning our rivers, poisoning our oceans, poisoning the air for some kind of benefit that we are trying to get. And the benefit mostly has to do with getting more of something. And as we try to get more of something, power, money, status, or so, the shadow of that shows up in this ecosystem as a destructive force, as a polluting force. Because as we go about this trajectory, we forget our connection to this whole system. We forget the fact that we are made of the same idea as humans in our bodies, in our minds, and in our souls. So at the same time as we exploit this planet and come to the brink of self-destruction as a species, we also learn that we are doing the same thing with our bodies. So let's talk a little bit more focused about the immune system. We all come with an immune system, all beings do, but if we focus on humans, we have a particular twofold immune system. One is called the innate immune system, and the other one is called the adaptive immune system. They work together. This immune system is largely at home in our gut. If we all know that if our gut is healthy, our immune system is going to be healthy. It's going to be able to ward off any attacks from the outside. And the innate immune system is a general defense against it, but we're even able to fight against new viruses or new dangers that attack us by way of the adaptive immune system, which is capable of learning. Once the adaptive immune system has learned with its T killer cells to defend against a certain virus, it's going to have learned that, according to all we know, but then it also can't fight against new viruses. So that the question whether we're going to be able to fight new viruses depends on the ability to create new T killer cells, naive cells that are able to fight off new viruses. And whether we produce enough of these cells is dependent on our overall lifestyle, on the strength of our immune system, our overall health status. Now, what has happened with that? So as we polluted this earth and the immune system of the earth, we have done the same to our bodies. So if we talk about the gut being the center of the immune system, we all know that digestion and the kind of food we put into our bodies is responsible for the kind of gut environment that we have, the kind of digestion that we have, and how strong our immune system is. But there's also other factors that play into this. And one of them is called Psychoneuro Immunology. This is a very interesting field of research. Psyche, the Greek word meaning the soul. Neurons is obviously the nervous system, and immunology, how immune are we against any attacks that would harm our bodies. So this word already connotes the fact that the way we feel, the way whether we are happy or not in our lives has an influence on the strength of our immune system. It's a pretty radical thought, because we are used to considering this whole thing all medical. It's definitely not. Mainstream medicine wants to make us believe, oh, okay, if I get sick, I just take a medication and that'll fix it. But it doesn't reach as far as understanding that we are a union of mind, body, spirit. How did we pollute our bodies? The food industry is a big research field where we can glean a lot of knowledge. One other thing which has to do with the pollution of the earth is pharmaceutical medication and specifically antibiotics. We all know that big pharma, as we like to call it, is mainly responsible for very serious pollution of our environment. It is also responsible for very serious pollution of our immune system, our gut, our bodies. Sometimes antibiotics will be helpful in fighting off a dangerous disease. But the mistake that most of us make is we take these on a continuous basis, and we all know what that does. Antibiotics, the word means against life. In general, we all know that antibiotics kill off the bad bacteria, but they also kill off the good ones. We all know after antibiotics we have to do probiotics, which means for life. We have to regenerate a good flora of the gut. So if we keep taking these antibiotics, we become resistant. No, we are resistant against, or rather, the bacteria are resistant against the antibiotics. They'll attack us anyway. And so what builds in a body is a climate of pollution, which at some point when we reach a critical mass of sick cells is pretty much impossible to repair. Why does all this happen? Because we have lost the connection to our gut feeling, our intuition, our spiritual health. Here's another interesting thesis that one teacher, Stan Groff, once made. He said, everybody thinks we are human beings having a spiritual experience. It's the other way around. We are spiritual beings having a human experience in the body on this earth. We come here, we go. We have a human experience and we return to spirit. Now, what does all this mean in terms of what we're talking about here? Medical and shamanic perspectives on depression, anxiety, addiction, and meaninglessness. What we're actually observing, and this is mostly in industrial societies nowadays, could be definitely be called an epidemic. The amount of pharmaceutical medication that's being passed out and sold to people is beyond anyone's imagination. People are suffering, are depressed at a degree that leads them to not care about life anymore, not care about their bodies, not care about the environment, not care about each other. And in many cases, even going so far as shooting each other out of hatred, out of divisiveness, out of life not meaning anything for them or someone else's life not meaning anything. Now, if we look at the planet from above and all these beings and the beauty that it has, we can probably get to a point where we feel the depth of the shock that this should cause in us, the sadness that this happens, the desperation, maybe the anger, the rage about that, and also the many ways that all of us are trying to find how to cope with this, how to remedy this situation. What made us lose meaning? What made us lose this sense for the incredible preciousness of this planet, this species, and all the living beings? Let me make a point that I like to repeat here, coming from many years in academic theology and studying all the world's religions. Most of the institutionalized religions are responsible for disempowering us as individual people from having and trusting our own spiritual experiences. They have told us that we must trust and follow the mediators of the respective religions, that there are preset ways on how to gain or attain spiritual experience. Most of the world's religions have discouraged us from trusting our gut feeling, our intuition, trusting our hearts, our sense of what is true and good and right for me and for us. Why have they done this? Initially, in the first years and maybe decades of this religion, there was an inaugurating spiritual experience brought forth by someone who was a meditator, a spiritual leader, a person that would bring the sacred word to the people that were looking for it. Then after a couple of decades, institutions started taking hold of the teachings, forming them into scripture, forming them into dogma, and using the dogma as a tool of power to influence people. Why is that possible? Because we're all seeking. We don't claim to know the truth. We don't know the key. What's the key? What is it? A lot of people have been trying to tell us, well, the key, if you want to gain this and that experience, or if you want to heal your body, or if you want to heal your mind, is this. And then it turned out to be maybe a fraction of the key, but not the whole thing. No one person has ever been able to forever tell us what the key is. We can only find it together, because we are meant to be a species that shares and that comes together and finds together. If we resist that, if we fight, if we believe in divisiveness, if we believe that Muhammad is greater than Jesus, Jesus is the best of all, or any of that, we are identified with the mind, but not with our gut intuition. We are coming from a place of fear that maybe what we think is not the last truth of it all. Here's a nice quote from Ramana Maharshi. Seek the source of the mind, and you find the mind does not exist at all. The mind turned outwards results in thoughts and objects. Turned inwards, it becomes itself the self. Turned inwards, it becomes itself the self. What Ramana is saying here is he's speaking exactly to the fixation on the mind that we have all been taught by so-called modern culture, which is tantamount to having been taught to distrust our intuition, our heart, our spirit, our gut. Some lessons from psychotherapy. I want to put something up here, and I'm going to hold it into the camera. Okay, you don't have to see every little detail of it. That's not the point. Okay, so what this is a clinical analysis of a patient who went through what's called a neurotransmitter panel. The person was very depressed when we were working with her, and we looked at the neurotransmitter panel to gain a sense of, well, what just on the level of neurophysiology is co-responsible for her state of depression and anxiety. The thing that I held up was a list of the neurotransmitters, and these are the happy hormones that are floating around in our body and in our brain. And by way of doing a neurotransmitter panel, we can gain some insight into, at least medically, what might be, or neurophysiologically, what might be the root cause of depression, anxiety, meaninglessness, desperation, addiction. And in this particular case, sure enough, some of these things were off. And so there's various ways to balance this out. One of them is to take pharmaceutical antidepressants. They kind of circumvent the cause and avoid looking at the cause. They remedy the situation for some time, but they don't work on the underlying issues that somebody might want to heal. In stretches of serious crises in life, these things can be very helpful, obviously, to if somebody has obligations and can't get out of their jobs or has to be responsible for children. It's good to have these things for a couple months. But usually we all get addicted to these things. We take them for years. And then we realize this problem that originally made me take them in the first place has not disappeared. I haven't resolved that. So people get off of these pharmaceutical antidepressants and they realize, oh, I feel anxiety again. I feel depressed again. I feel meaningless again. What do I do about this? I listen to my gut, ideally. There is a reason why we have an epidemic depression, why we have addiction, why we have meaninglessness, why there's so much suicidality. So let's start turning to the positive side of all this, because everything on this earth is light and dark and shadow and light, and it's warm and it's cold, and there's snow and there's sun. So what do we learn from this? There's got to be some meaning in all this, why we're going down this path, why all this is happening, why so many people are depressed, why they get into addictive behavior. So my friend Ron here and my friend Tony, they have this wonderful saying. There they are. They say, we trust in the perfect unfolding of things. That's a very nice saying, and it moves me again and again. I think of it often when I complain about something, because I think this saying expresses a very deep trust that there's learning here in all that we experience as human beings. We can look at a lot of these things as being wrong, pathologize them, demonize them, get angry, get disappointed, get desperate about people feeling so much meaninglessness, feeling so much pain, so forth. Another way of saying, I trust the perfect unfolding, is to say, and this saying I made up with a friend of mine, we talk about these things a lot, to believe that anything should be different from the way it is right now is making false assumptions about the nature of reality. That's pretty serious, because we're actually saying, well, everything that is just the way it is. It's neither right nor wrong. It's just the way it is. Because this whole thing here is a school. We're going to school. We're trying to learn something. So why does addiction happen? For example, addiction. People who are tempted to get into addictive behavior are most of the time very creative, very sensitive, people who are very talented in a way that may not always be promoted by these industrial societies. But they're certainly talented in their own way. They're spiritual, they're insightful, they're trying to cope with the external appearances in this world. And because our industrial nations don't have a lot to offer yet in the way of spiritual connection, communion, learning from this life, these people seek out methods that somehow are a replacement kind of satisfying behavior that for a temporary phase in their lives may maybe give them some kind of satisfaction, then they'll wake up from it again and harsh reality is in front of my face, and then I want to engage in the addictive behavior again. So it's really, transpersonal psychology calls it a tweaked search for truth, a erroneous search for truth. And it has stayed away from pathologizing people who engage in addictive behavior, and has encouraged them to trust their gut, their intuition, their heart, and seek out better ways to achieve states that are expanded, that are meditative, that are shamanic states of consciousness. So what our modern medical research can tell us is if we look at the body, mind, spirit connection and understand this beyond the mainstream medical model that is quite functionalistic, we can understand that this is a unit that is in connection with the earth, with this organism. And if we learn how to align our physical organism with the physical organism of the earth, we can understand how we can bring everything back into the original alignment, how it was created. Functional medicine, as this new field of research is called, looks at natural ways to fix our gut, to fix our cardiovascular system, to fix our neurotransmitters in a way where we can be happy as beings, where we can be healthy, where we can stop abusing our body, abusing our environment, and collaborate with the very essential nature of this creation. Details are all out in books nowadays. I don't want to do any quotes here. I don't want to lead anybody in any direction, but if you're interested in all this, you can find many, many good sources, new publications, research, and so forth. I want to specifically mention a very controversial area of research that has arisen in the past decades, and this is research into shamanic medicines. Medicines or compounds that are able to powerfully expand our consciousness without harming our bodies and without creating addictive behavior. If we look at the research that mainly three institutions have advanced in the past couple of years, USONA Institute, New York University, and Johns Hopkins University, studies into the effects and healing potentials of mainly psilocybin, the active compound in the mushrooms, LSD, MDMA, 5-MeO-DMT, and other shamanic molecules that have been known for thousands of years by the native peoples of this earth. This is some very promising research. If you're open to this, I encourage you to look this up on the internet. And there's a lot of reports from people that are very quickly able, with the help of this assisted therapy, to understand the larger framework of what we've laid out so far. The understanding that our life is an organism in touch with the organism of this planet. One example, if you think of the mushroom, what we call the mushroom is the fruiting body that we see growing out of the soil. About a couple of inches underneath the forest floor, there's a mycelium of network that is in touch with trees, roots of other plants, that according to new research is communicating with all the other plants, passing on information by way of sending molecules through its channel, through its network. That is precisely akin to how the human brain works. The flow of neurotransmitters for the collaboration of all beings and all species. If we work with these sacred medicines, these are visions that a lot of people report about. These visions teach people, as they report, to understand the larger meaning of this whole organism, the earth and its inhabitants, all the beings, all the plants, and the humans. These experiences teach people, so they report, about how to collaborate with this organism. And many people who have engaged in addictive behavior have experienced very powerful and sustaining healing from their addiction. People who have been severely depressed report not feeling depressed anymore. People who have had long-lasting anxiety, claustrophobia, these kinds of experiences have reported being able to let that go and ride an elevator and ride in an underground or whatever the case may be. People have dropped addiction. People have dropped suicidal ideation, their frustration in life, and they've reported that they understood that this life is a learning experience. There is nobody who has the key, except maybe our gut, our intuition. These shamanic keys teach us about the mind, body, spirit. And I could go on and on, as you probably notice, but I don't want to be a person who makes like they have the key. It's been my life's search to find one, and I'm still searching. And I think so are all of us, if we are honest and if we're humble. So let me finish by telling a story here. The area where I'm blessed to live has a sacred mountain and a sacred lake. And this lake and this mountain has been revered by the Native Americans for tens of thousands of years. Settlers only came 170 years ago. The magic is still there. So if we picture all of us walking up that mountain from various sides, one of us is going to say, oh, this is all forests, so this is my truth. Another person is going to walk up a gravel road. They're going to say, well, it's all stones and gravel. This is my truth. Next person is going to walk up and maybe part of the mountain has burned down, so it's all black. So this is my truth. So we're all in search of the key. If we get identified with what we see and make this the only truth, we're lost. We're going to be divisive against each other. We're going to argue. We're going to get into our minds. And we're going to preach that this is the only true religion. If we're humble enough, and if we utilize the methods that have been given to us by native peoples and by alternative research and medicine, and put that together, before we claim we got the key and we got the truth, we're all going to meet at the top of the mountain. And then we're going to stand there and we're going to look at the whole lake and all the mountain ranges and all the forest and all the burnt parts and all the live parts and all the parts that are recuperating from all the madness that we've brought to this species and to this humanity and to this earth. And we're going to say, if we're going to stand up here and look around and start perceiving this beauty, we may have a lot more with regard to this key that we're looking for on how to deal with the epidemic of anxiety, depression, addiction, and meaninglessness and suicidality. So, ending right here on top of the mountain, let's look around together, and if you like the idea, bring together and share, if you want, what works for you. What is your key to deal with this very, very tense, intense, challenging, but also deeply promising and transformative time that we live in? Thank you.